conversations have you had with these secretaries going in about what they might be looking for on day one in terms of ways to save money within the different departments across the state? And there are certainly state employees that are on pins and needles waiting to see what their fate might be in the new year.
I mean, the bottom line, our two goals are jobs. I mean, overall, it's getting Wisconsin working again, so it's jobs and getting the government itself working to balance this budget. That's incredibly important. You know, I just had a couple of briefings early this morning on the state budget. I have several a day with many of the same people I mentioned that we're making appointments on as far as cabinet secretaries. But our charge more than anything is, and they all have it branded on them, is that we're expecting them to help us create 250,000 new jobs. That's as important as anything else out there. In terms of balancing the budget, we've been going through budget by budget, and it's certainly will take whatever efficiencies they can find, but in most cases, to balance a $3 billion budget deficit, you're talking about overall wage and benefit reforms that will happen not department or agency by agency, but will happen statewide. And you're talking about major programs. You're talking about why Dennis Smith is so incredibly important to us, making reforms in Medicaid, that allow us to squeeze more dollars out there while still serving people in need, making changes in terms of local aids so that we can better balance our budget but still do so in a way that protects core services that our schools and our local governments provide. Those are all things that won't just be on an agency by agency basis, they'll be on an overall budget basis.
Well, Scott, day one after you put your lunch in the fridge, what's the first thing you do 8:30 Tuesday morning?
On Tuesday morning, well, you know, we're going to talk about an assessment as to where every state agency is. Later that day, not necessarily the first thing, but that afternoon, I'm going to be meeting with the full cabinet to get an assessment as to where things are at. Obviously, they've had meetings in part of the transition, but the bottom line is they're going to find a lot more interesting things come Tuesday morning when they're in the office officially. So that afternoon, we're going to have a briefing. Probably the most important thing is I'm going to follow up with legislative leaders in the Assembly and the Senate about moving forward on our special session jobs plan, because that's really the most important thing right now. We need to get that through. We need to get it through quickly, and we need to send a clear message to the employers both within the state as well as those who might want to come to the state that things have changed and it's better to do business here.
Will the salaries of your cabinet secretaries be higher, lower, or the same as the people in your place? How is it decided?
Yeah.
When will they be announced?
For us, we'll put it out early next week when they're being officially put into office. But overall, our goal was to keep the total amount the same or less than where the current administration's at. That'll fluctuate. What's that?
Did you meet that goal?
Yeah.
Keeping it the same or
Yeah.
less?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The key was though that you're going to have some that are less. They're going to have some that are more. Again, depending on background expertise and what it takes to get certain people into those positions. Because as you well aware right now, you have some members of the current cabinet who've been there for some time, and others who are here more recently, and so there are variations in terms of what people got when they first came in and where they're at now, depending on their experience, and so that factored in as well.
Scott, Rick Chandler had made some headlines right after the election talking about or advocating or speaking out about potential sales tax increase. Where do you stand on that?
There's not going to be a tax increase in this administration, in this budget, or in the future. And I should just clarify, Rick Chandler spoke to a group that wanted to know some options out there. He wasn't advocating for any particular option. He spoke on what the different options might be for the state government in the future. And to me, that he's not advocating it, and I certainly am not, so we're comfortable with him in the future.
Scott, the selection of Kathy Stepp might be seen as somewhat antagonistic towards career DNR employees and environmental people around the state. Today, Representative-elect Brett Hulsey said putting Kathy Stepp in charge of the DNR is like putting Lindsay Lohan in charge of a rehab clinic. I mean, defend Kathy Stepp's environmental record and the selection of her for us.
Sure. In our case, the Department of Natural Resources is going to uphold the laws of the state of Wisconsin. It's not going to go any further than what the laws are. That's the expectation we have, and I think that's a clear message. We're going to have a DNR that's based on science and that's predictable. And I have every confidence she can fulfill that. She served on the Natural Resources Board. She served leading that cause when it comes to natural resources in the state legislature. And in the private sector, she's had personal experience in industries that obviously are very much involved with the Department of Natural Resources. But for us, we're going to conserve. We understand that protect the state's economy A core portion of that means protecting our natural resources, conserving our natural resources. Farming makes up roughly $60 billion, the state's economic impact. Tourism makes up about $12 billion. Both of those core industries are dependent on good land, water, and air, and so we're going to continue to protect that. But we're going to do it in a way that also balances that responsibility with making sure we do it in a way that doesn't devastate the state's economy. I have every confidence she can balance those two.
Take a
There
follow-up.
was some speculation, mostly among Democrats, that the reason this announcement is coming on December 30th is because you had some difficulties recruiting cabinet members. Was it hard to find people to come to join the government in this economy?
No, actually the opposite. We have some people who've took significant pay cuts to come work for us. If anything, the biggest challenge we had was deciding amongst a series of exceptionally, in many cases, almost overqualified candidates for these positions. Now, there might be some who are fixated on failure and want that to be the answer, but the simple answer for us is we had an abundance of candidates, and we just wanted to make sure we put the right team together.
Given your majorities in the legislature, were you concerned about how many active reps you took? You took 3 out of the
Three,
assembly, but no state senators. Were you worried about how many you could take from each chamber?
No, I mean, in the end, if it had been 51, I might view it a little differently, but having 60 members there certainly gives some breathing room. Although when you look, I mean, we expect these seats to be filled fairly quickly, probably before the final vote in the state budget, in terms of when all the special session, primary and general election are completed. And as far as the special session itself, my hope is there's a whole lot more than 60 votes when these measures go through the Assembly and Senate. I think Republican and Democrat alike, there's members in the both chambers who want to see us do better when it comes to jobs. And so I'm not worried about it being a party line vote.
We have time for one or two more quick ones.
Mike Hipsch had proposed when in the legislature splitting DNR into 2 agencies, wildlife management
Yep.
and then environmental
Yep.
oversight. Any thoughts on that?
Nope, DNR is going to be one agency.
Scott, any thoughts on some of the, I suppose, this ambitious agenda being laid out
Yeah.
by now County Executive Lee Holloway?
No, I wish him well. I still pay taxes in Milwaukee County. My home's still there, and so I want to make sure that as a taxpayer and as someone who cares about that community, that he does well, and I wish him the best. He'll obviously do things differently, as will whoever ultimately is elected to take the spot that fulfill the term through 2012. My hope is that they find a way to balance both the needs of the people of that community along with the needs of the taxpayers.
Any advice for him?
Spend a lot of time out of the courthouse.
Getting back to the Jaden appointment, you said Green Bay's got one of the most successful chambers in the state.
Mhm.
What is your definition of that? What stands out to you about that?
Well, I think if you look at, when I've been there in the past, working with community leaders, when I met with the chamber, with the board of directors, I think you've got an actively engaged chamber, one that's had a good strategic planning process, one that's been active in promoting business. Those are the sorts of things we want out of the next secretary. Is someone who's going to be active in pushing a plan to make this more attractive in the state. Certainly, even beyond commerce, we're going to be doing that, but I think having someone who understands economic development, who's had active experience in that, and who's had active support not only from his board, but from the major businesses, big and small, in the Green Bay area, I think is incredibly positive for what that means for the state of Wisconsin. Thanks.